Welcome to the Studio Chat podcast, your safe haven for self-discovery, growth, and transformation. I'm Barbara Thompson, your host. I'm a therapist and the founder of Self-Care Studio. Whether you're joining me from my private counselling sessions, my courses, or right here on this podcast, I'm dedicated to helping you reconnect with yourself and live life authentically. This podcast is your reminder to pause, reflect, and reclaim your power. Together we'll explore the messy, beautiful journey of life, from letting go of people-pleasing and overthinking to embracing your worth and stepping boldly into your true self. Here, you're not just a listener, you're part of a community that values self-trust, self-love, and living life on your terms. So whether you're navigating challenges, seeking clarity, or simply craving a dose of inspiration, you've come to the right place. Thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with me. Let's dive into today's episode and continue this journey together. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Studio Chat podcast. Today, I love having guests that are just down the road, and so I feel really privileged and honoured to share this guest with you, that she's just up the road in Wollongong, and I have followed her on social media for a while because she does a lot of breath work and mind-body connection stuff, and obviously as a therapist, that's what I do. I just don't listen to what people say. I look at their bodies and how their mind and body connect. And so I followed Whitney for a while on this amazing stuff she's been doing and has done. And it was a post recently she posted about, hey, I'm just going to fill you in a little bit about why I'm a therapist. And I always read people's stories because I think that's a big part of why we connect with people. But I know as a therapist why people come and see me is once you learn someone's story, people go, wow, okay, they like, it's a very vulnerable place to be. And I thank you, Whitney, for sharing that was a very vulnerable post, but it also allows people to see what people go through. We all have a story and we connect through stories. And when I read that, I was like, first of all, you have to come on my podcast, which you are. And secondly, I could see parts of me in it too of, wow, how does she keep going? Because I get asked that a lot as well, all that stuff you've been through, Barbara, what kept you going? And it was when I saw all the places you've traveled, all the modalities you've learned, all the hard stuff that you've been through, that you're really honest and vulnerable in this post saying, yeah, this was a tough time. The reason why I've got you on here is to normalize this and to make it okay to talk about our stories and help us. And I know there's someone out there listening to this right now that needs you, that needs to connect with you, that needs to probably come and do some breath work with you and learn from you. So I really want to welcome, I'm just going to explain a little bit to my listeners about what you do. So I'm going to introduce you to Whitney Geoghegan, and she is a oxygen breathwork therapist, a hypnotherapist, and a fitness coach. And she blends the soul side of ourselves and science together. So that's what I really love about what you do. Welcome to my podcast.
Thank you so much. That was quite the introduction. So I feel very honoured and humbled and grateful to be here and share more of my story and more about me. And hopefully, as you mentioned, perhaps someone will resonate and just find a piece of my story as perhaps a survival guide for them and potentially blend into their own story.
Yeah. And I think I find when I meet vulnerable people, or in the past when I was working through my own stuff, it helped me. I could be Barbara. I can be myself. When you learn someone that shares their story and they're so honest, and sometimes people will read your story and go, I can't believe you shared that. Or wow, like, I don't know if you ever get those comments of how brave you are. But in reality, we all have stuff. We all go through stuff. And if you haven't, it's coming. But we all learn through the good, the bad, the heavy, the sad, all sorts of emotions and feelings. And that's what makes us who we are as human beings. And I think especially as women, we do not connect enough and talk about those times. It's still very brave face. You know, we could walk around the world and be someone that people have no idea what's going on inside. And especially with social media, you can look at someone's life or someone's business and be like, wow. And then you really don't know what the inner demons are. and you talk a lot about your inner demons, which I absolutely love because we all have them.
Yeah, we do. That's for sure. I don't think there's any denying that. I think it's just breaking the stigma around it and actually being saying like, hey, I'm human. I have feelings, I have emotions, and I have that little voice inside of my head that perhaps on a day-to-day basis can be quite a hard one to tame or to even, live with at times, because we can be our own harshest critics. And I think once we do open that gate and open up and share our stories and share what we are actually going through, it really not only humbles us but creates that humanness and the humility and a deeper sense of connection to say, hey, we may be unique and different in many ways, but at the same time we are quite similar in so many ways.
I'm going to start a little bit a quarter in, and then we're going to go back to the beginning of like where this all started for you. But there was one thing that really stood out for me, one part of that you've lived in all these different places. There was one part when you went off to Europe with a one-way ticket, and you were like, I was trying to run away from my demons, but they actually came with me. And I think anyone can resonate with this, that if you have an inner critic or you have these demons inside, until we face them front on, and we need help with that, we can't do that ourselves. They don't go away. We can push them down for so much. But I was watching your body language, and I mean, it was as if I was there, but sometimes it feels like that. When I was looking at that photo with you standing outside, I think it was the departure gates. I could see the look on your face. What were you feeling standing in that photo before you were about to go off to Europe with a one-way ticket?
I feel like there was so many mixed emotions within that. I thought that one-way ticket was my scapegoat to a new beginning, a new life, happiness, joy. Like I really thought that just leaving where I was, I'd finally be happy. I think that was the big thing that I was seeking, was just happiness. And I thought, you know what, it's going to be over the other side of the world with a one-way ticket, and I can leave all my problems behind, and this is just going to be it. It's a fresh new start. And whilst, don't get me wrong, I do believe, environment and where we live and things like that do play a part in, how we feel and how we are as a human being. But little did I guess I know at that capacity at that time, just how much, you cannot run away from your own mind. You are where your feet are. Your mental health, your mindset, your physical health, all of it is with you 24/7, 7 days a week. And I guess I hadn't really honored also where I was at that time in my life and where I was mentally and emotionally. And, I look back in that reflection, I do see someone who was really withdrawn, quite depressed, suffering quite severely with her own mental health. And probably not feeling as supported, definitely. And so it was just this, all right, let's just ticket one way off to the other side of the world. And I learnt a lot. But that reinforcement of being solo, being on the other side of the world, and day in and day out really being confronted and sitting with my own inner demons and my own mental health was huge.
Yeah. Because a lot of us can think of it as, and I've done it myself, whether it's a new job, whether it's living in a different country, I've done that too. And you think it's almost a chance to reinvent yourself. Because it's almost a chance that no one knows who you are.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. It can be a new relationship, a new job, a new house, a new country. And all of us, I think, deep down go, oh, actually, no one knows me here. We already push everything down. We're very good. If we're not taught, or we don't have to get to a point like me where I was like, I can't do this anymore. And that was my point of the inner learning of what's on inside. But most of us will just ignore it until our body doesn't allow us to ignore it, or something happens that we think, I can't keep doing this. Okay. So I've kind of got an idea of this kind of all started for you when you're about 14.
Yeah. So I guess my own mental health journey, at the beginning of my story that kind of led me to where I am today, began just before I was 14, my dad got diagnosed with cancer, and he passed not too long after my 14th birthday. So it all kind of happened while I was at high school, trying to navigate that. Such a young teenager who just has no kind of awareness. You just don't think it's going to ever happen to you. You don't ever think it's going to happen to your family. You have that preconceived idea that you get your fairy tale life, happy ever after, and mum and dad are there forever. And whilst many people do have that experience, and that is beautiful and perfect for them, the way my life unfolded was, unfortunately, yes, I suffered quite a big loss at such a young age. And in reflection, I don't think I ever actually understood how much such a traumatic event would impact me, because I didn't have the awareness. And yet looking back now, I can see it was it's such an interesting thing to say, but a big blessing in many ways, because I wouldn't be the woman that I am today if my life didn't unfold that way. I wouldn't have the wisdom or the knowledge or the lived experience or the understanding that has allowed me to step into a therapy role and be who I am today, to then help and support other people. So as much as it was such a big life-changing things in many ways, and it did really send me down quite a different path as to what I ever imagined my life would turn out. And it was a long, heavy path, a lot of hard times, a lot of struggles with depression and mental health issues and disordered eating and body image issues, and it impacted relationships and domestic violence and a whole lot of things that stemmed from perhaps the unraveling of my dad passing. But in the same time, through all of that is where all the lessons and the growth and the deciphering through what I do want in life and what I don't want in life, and really shaping me to become who I am now. And so, yes, while I honor the grief that came with that, I also honor the gratitude and the blessings of what that bestowed upon me in the life that I live today.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank
Honestly, it is one of the, if not the hardest thing when you lose a parent or a loved one, because, and especially I think at that time, reading what I know of your story is where you are now, I think you're quite spiritually connected. And for me, I don't know about you, and I'm not religious, and this is to anyone that's listening to this, personally, I found with any passing or whatever you want to call it, I find the spiritual side really helps me understand the world, connect with the world. And I'm not like heavily into it, but I'm really, through my own story, that has been something in my life that I haven't been able to ignore. Certain situations have happened, I've been protected, or I've met someone that does crystals or sage, and I've just learned, oh, you do this. And even just the awareness of, this is so simple, just the full moon and how it affects me and my cycle and stuff. Tell you what, that would have really helped me when I was a teenager, because I was pretty fiery.
Yeah.
So it's these small things. And I think, and it's easy to say now when no, it's not easy to say now, but when you have perspective and you have a deeper inner knowing of yourself, which is hours upon hours of work and sitting with yourself, I can honestly, I can't even begin to imagine when you're a teenage girl from that 14 to 18 of how young Whitney would have felt. Because none of it would have made sense. Life would have probably felt so unfair. There would have been a massive hole in your heart. And the thing with grief is, especially when you lose a parent, after the funeral, however you celebrate life, people go back to their normal lives, and then you're like, hang on, my whole world has changed.
Yeah, that was exactly it. I think, like I said, now, in hindsight, the perspective I have now is amazing to be able to sit with. But in the thick of it, and in those moments, you feel like, why me? You question it. My dad was meant to walk me down the aisle one day if I got married, or, this is just not how life was ever meant to be. And of course, not only do you lose one parent, but the other parent can then end up in so much of their own grief that at times it kind of almost feels like you're dealing with a lot of loss, and you're all kind of, I guess that is the word, at loss. You kind of don't know how to then function through life. And then even moments where you start to experience joy, you almost feel guilty for it. And there's just so many things that you begin to navigate. And I guess it is that everyone kind of goes back to normality, or their normality, and you're like, well, I don't know what normality is for me anymore. And it feels like you get forgotten about a little bit, because at the moment you've all that attention on you, and then all of a sudden you're trying to adjust as life moves forward, but you feel stuck. You feel like you're in the frozen space of time, and you kind of just don't even know which way to go, or you no longer kind of trust life, or you don't feel like, a big thing for me was like then worthy of happiness. And I turned to a lot of control as well, which I can see in reflection. But back then I wouldn't have known. And I guess you have all of these big, heavy emotions and feelings, and you don't really know what to do with it. And at the same time, being at school, it's kind of like, oh, you just go back to school and you're younger, so you just like get on with it and you just get going because you're a kid. And, it's so many things at the same time to try and navigate. And I guess back then when I was quite young, it was like mental health wasn't talked about. And I felt quite alone. And I felt like I was the only one facing it. And, you'd feel really misunderstood and really unheard. And I do remember my first, I guess, instance with counselling was at school. And I became quite rebellious and quite angry. I was angry at the world, why bother doing anything? Why bother going to school? Like, just in grief and angry. And I remember the principal at school pulled me out and took me to her office and said, I'm going to sit you with the school counsellor. And back then as a teenager, I was like, I don't need counselling, like, da, 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 da. Like, I was angry, and like, I didn't want to look different at school. I didn't want, but I remember the counsellor saying, like, I can feel your anger, and you're allowed to tell me to, get lost. You're allowed to shut me down. Everything you're feeling right now. She normalized and validated and made accepted and okay. And I ended up actually finding quite solace in going and being able to see the school counsellor at school, and just having someone there to kind of chat to as I navigated it all. And so that was probably my real first taste of kind of, therapy, or actually being like, oh, whoa, like I can talk about this with someone who's not going to react back to me, because sometimes it's hard to talk to your parents, or someone who's going to have their own projections upon certain things. And so having those real safe spaces at such a young age was quite pivotal for me.
Yeah, someone that's not trying to fix you. When sometimes when you talk to girlfriends at that age and stuff, they're either not interested or interested, and then they're like, oh yeah, but just do this and you'll be fine, or just don't worry about it. Like, and they don't know any different. They're trying to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge loss. And I think you mentioned something in there about wanting to then control everything. So was that because it was so out of your control that you lost your dad, that you're like, I never want to feel that feeling again?
Yeah, I feel like you feel a sense of powerlessness. You feel like life is out to get you, and you stop trusting in life, because you have this like idea, that is someone who co-created you to bring you into this world. How could that possibly ever happen to me? And I do see now that you start to feel, for safety reasons, to feel safe, to have a level of foundation, to feel some sort of, it is just control, I guess. And I lost my dad, lose his health, control over health. It was something out of somewhat of his control, and I lost him, lose his health. So I made a decision that it was time to take control over mine, because I didn't want that to happen to me. And again, I can see that now in hindsight, but yeah, it is finding something to control, trying to have control over your emotions. And that led me down into the fitness industry. And so I signed up to a gym, got a personal trainer, and started to take care of my health. And I guess it looked like controlling my food. It looked like controlling how much I moved my body. And that became, for a moment in time, exciting. I started to feel, the endorphins that we get from exercise. I started to feel really good. The compliments started to streamline in. You're losing weight. You're looking this. You're looking that. Getting more attention at school from certain people. And that kind of drove this, oh, my worth is now determined by how I'm looking. And then that gets double kind of imprinted in you when you look at magazines and social media, and like it's all about women's to be lovable, to be happy, X, Y, and Z. It's about how you look. And then I guess as such a young, vulnerable woman who is impressionable at that age, who is craving love and stability and safety and happiness after losing my dad, to then being told, well, if I just achieve the body shape, and if I just get skinny, or if I just get that perfect body, then I'll get the happiness again. And that is something that I was really deeply desiring. And so they kind of go hand in hand of like, I'm trying to fill the void, trying to control, don't know how to process my emotions, and I want happiness. So the world's telling me to get it. It looks like X, Y, and Z. And it ended up in a slippery slope. And I think, I suffered with bulimia for quite a long time. And it didn't end there. Once I kind of moved through that, it went to the next thing of, body dysmorphia, and then it went into quite depressive episodes and orthorexia, and then really extreme obsessions with eating really clean and being really healthy, and kind of just kept morphing from one thing to the other, until I hit a pivotal point when I was living over in Thailand. Fast forward a little bit, and I was in a relationship that ended up in domestic abuse. And I think that was my final straw after all of it, rock bottom, where I was like, I cannot do this anymore. That was my, yeah.
So you moved over to Thailand, and I think part of that was you loved, is it Mai Tai?
Muay Thai, yeah.
Yeah, Muay Thai. Mai Thai's a drink, I think. Sorry. So Muay Thai. So that's a martial art.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that boxing and kickboxing, or just boxing?
Well, it's a blend. So it's the traditional sport of Thailand, and they blend, kicking, punching, elbows, knees. It's called the Art of Eight Limbs.
And for you to be, you were heading down the path of to be a professional at it.
Yeah, it was a dream of mine. I never thought I'd ever step into the ring. I just really loved it because I think it was, for the first time, a form of exercise where it was no longer about how you looked. It was about how you moved, and learning a technique and a skill and how your body could actually move. Obviously, then you take it into the professional side and fighting, where there becomes weight cuts and things like that. So as much as I had started doing the inner work, and by inner work, I meant turning within and sitting with myself and, facing the uncomfortable parts and actually really journeying inwardly. I hadn't necessarily, I feel like, got to a really, I don't really like the word healed, but I probably wouldn't say I was in a really good place enough to be able to enter that sport looking back now, because it kind of just flung me back into disordered eating habits, because it was all about weight cut and things like that. But yes, I never thought I would enjoy it, but I absolutely loved it. I can see it played a really pivotal role in building confidence inside of myself at the same capacity. But the flip side, in self-reflection, I can also see how it allowed me to wear another mask of just being a strong, independent woman, because I stepped into that role at 14. I grew up really quickly. I became really dependent. I didn't want to rely on anyone. I didn't want to lose again. And so it meant keeping myself safe and becoming highly independent. And so stepping into Muay Thai in many ways allow me to become really empowered and feel a sense of strength in so many ways. But I also see in reflection that allow me to have this mask of I am a strong, independent woman and you can't hurt me, and I will just keep going because I am a fighter and I've been fighting my whole life. And so this just kind of really matches where I'm at.
When you said no one can hurt me, wasn't the mirror of that at that time you were in a DV relationship?
Yeah. So it was a very interesting time of my life that I kind of, upon reflection again, look at and go, wow, I would never wish that upon anyone. And I will never excuse anyone's behavior at all. But this is my own self-reflection and my personal perspective for myself and my life to see how little self-love and self-value and self-worth I had in that moment in time. If we perhaps talk about law of attraction, I attracted someone that mirrored that back to me. And unfortunately, like I said, I do not wish this upon and I do not excuse it, but I can see how I attracted it. And it was the wake-up call. It only happened once and I was like, no way, never again. And I understand that's not everyone's situation and circumstances, and, it's different. For everyone, if you are listening and you're in that circumstance, then yes, just highlighting, this is my personal experience with it. But when we talk about being completely guided, there was one plane ticket that night home and I was like, thank you, Dad. And I booked it and I was out of there. But it was a very strong point for me because I was already doing a level of therapy and a level of work, and I had been introduced to breath and hypnosis and found a really amazing therapist at that point, but it was quite at the beginning. And I got home and that was the nail in the coffin. That was it. I was done. I was like, I'm committing to learning how to love myself so that never happens again. And I never tracked that situation into my life.
But when I've been in a similar situation and I had no idea, like I knew I didn't love myself. I knew I had very low self-worth, very low self-esteem, no confidence. No one would have known that. I think you're quite similar. No one would have known that. But my inner truth was reflected in, I did this for 38 years, I was attracting these really horrible, horrible men and who would, like I said, you don't wish it on anyone, but it was reflecting back what I felt about myself. And I had no idea that's what that happens. And also it was my normal. So when I'm listening to this, like, you look back and you think, oh my God, I can't even believe the things I would say or the kind of person I was back then. But I love that you did do a shout out to your dad. Yeah. Was that the beginning part of the spiritual? Had you always spoken to him since he passed when you were 14?
No, I hadn't. I mean, for me, my belief was once he was gone, and that was it. You wouldn't really have any other kind of connection. So,
wow.
No, I guess, I mean, I always was a very curious person. I'm a very curious kid who asked a lot of questions, and a part of me always had this deep inner knowing that there had to be more to life. I kind of was that. I was like, those questions of what are we here for? What is life all about? Am I really here to work a 9 to 5 and just grind? Or like, I had a deeper kind of spark within me, an inner niggle, something that just kept saying, there's got to be more to this. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things that has kept me going. It's one of the things that has kept me continuously discovering and wanting to learn more. I'm never settling and kind of had a seeker for truth and a seeker for the meaning of life and the purpose of it all. And there was this, as much as I felt like the light inside of me had gone out, there was a little spark that had to say, there's got to be another way. This cannot be my life. I cannot be here just to be miserable, suffering, depressed, unhappy. And I think, I can't even really, I think, it maybe amplified when I did at one stage through high school ask for help with my eating disorder, and I went to a doctor and they kind of just made me fill out a form and said, you're depressed, and gave me antidepressants and sent me on my way. And I was only 17-ish, like around that age group. And I kind of was like, something didn't sit right again with that. And then it deepened into going to more counseling and then finding the next person until someone kind of said, hey, you should really go and see this person. They're incredible. And I was like, oh, look, I'm kind of at desperation point. Like, I'll go try anything at this stage. And I walked into that she is currently still my therapist to this day, about 12 years later. I sat in that chair and I kind of really didn't know why I was there. And she was like, I'm going to tell you a story. And I was like, okay. And then from that moment, that story was her truth. And my mind just exploded. And she was quite intuitive. So it was like, your dad's here. And I'm just like, what? Like, and then kind of gave me, this really beautiful story that gave me a very different perspective of life. And this, I guess, maybe the cycles of life and perhaps what perceives is afterlife, human life ends, and that, it began to open up into what we may call more spirituality. And that same woman introduced me to hypnotherapy and then breathwork. And breathwork was probably the first time that, as much as I then had kind of started reading Louise Hay and You Can Heal Your Life and kind of more into that spiritual realm and doing a lot of my own self-reading and, podcasts and things like that, the experience for myself was the one thing that made the difference between knowledge from a book to say, hey, this is, perhaps what's out there, and, spirituality is to the embodied experience of, oh, well, no, that is my truth. And it was the very first breathwork session, and I felt my dad around me, and it wasn't like I seen him, and it wasn't like anything else but a deep inner knowing that his soul was there, and I could feel his energy in my hands and that he was around me. And that was the confirmation for me of like, my dad never left, and he just transformed and changed form. His human body may no longer exist, but his soul will forever remain, and I can tune into that. When I turn my intention within and quiet the outside noise, quiet the inner critic, I have my own intuitive abilities. I have my own psychic abilities. I don't have to be special. We're all born the same with the own same connection if we take the moment in time to actually connect and tune into the own wisdom of our heart and our body and our soul. And that was, I guess, my real spiritual awakening, or as you may call it, or connection to,
A couple of things I want to say. How special is it to still have the same therapist now? That's you two have a very special bond. That's pretty cool.
It's very I feel very honored and privileged to be able to have someone that has been able to support me in many ways. And, with everything, it kind of ebbs and flows. It's not like I see her every week. There's spaciousness in between that, because her approach is becoming self-resilient as well, and building that sense of not relying on the therapist, but also knowing that you can self-empower as well, but also knowing that there's that support and someone to hold that space and guide you when needed. She's become, a mentor therapist and a teacher as well. So very lucky.
That's so special. And that's why I do therapy too. Like I needed someone and never had to do something. So I've done all my own learnings, and then was in a situation where I was really taken advantage of. And I was like, I don't want anyone to be taken advantage of in the therapy setting. It's really dangerous. And I think, so when you were there and you did the breath work, a lot of people are quite intrigued by breath work. Like they've seen Wim Hof or, I don't know, anything to do with breath work. It goes with the ice baths and stuff. What was your first impression when you did when you started to really get into breath work? What did you notice the most about it? How did it help you?
God, I can't even articulate it because it's such an experiential thing. But for me personally, I think it was just one, I was like, okay, cool, like I'm open to this, so let's just see. I think I've kind of gotten to a point where I was like, I had done quite a bit of talk therapy, but there was a part of me that felt like I needed a physiological shift. There's something needed to change deep within. And my therapist, luckily, I had a really supportive therapist who kind of just worked with me to build the mental capacity as well to be ready to enter into my first breathwork session, which I think is huge, especially when people are considering it, is having the level of safety and someone who can kind of tune into you and where you are at. Because I feel for me, where I was at in a space mentally, because of how much it can bring up, especially when we talk about emotional release and trauma release as breathwork as a form of therapy. It's super important to be able to have the mental health component to it, because you can bring it all up and then you physiologically have moved through it and you have kind of a knowing, but when you kind of come back to conscious reality, you've got a lot to sit with and process. And so mentally being in a really good space to be able to then process that mentally is so important, to have then that person to unpack. And I think that is where I'm really grateful for, because I could only at the beginning move through a 6-minute breath work. And this is a unique style to the oxygen breath movement that the founder, Simone Louise, has created. And it's really powerful. And we invoke music and a certain conscious breath with a certain body position. And it's really, it's 6 minutes doesn't seem like a lot, but it has really powerful shifts. And I think at first I just couldn't believe the cathartic release I had, how visceral it was in my body, how my body took the lead. And, for me, that meant shaking and a lot of physical movement. I'm quite physical when I breathe. So the body kind of really took over. And when I kind of came out of it, and then after that, it was the huge amount of grief that then followed and the emotional pain that then came up and afterwards as well. And then I kind of came out, I was like, holy, how does one ever explain that? And also I had no idea I was storing that within me, that amount of emotion, that amount of pain. And that was from 6 minutes. And I think from that moment, I had a real eye opener that it was no longer just breathing, it was therapeutic in itself. And it was the release that I had been seeking, which then I think I can tie back to my eating disorder when I talk about needing a release of emotion. That was, I can now in perspective see the two of correlation. It wasn't so much the release from the food. It was, I'm trying to process or release the emotions that I'd been holding on to. I just didn't know how.
Mm. Wow, that's so powerful, isn't it? Because, yeah, a lot of people just have never tapped into all sides of them. It's like they, I hear often people go, oh, I've got this niggling knee, or I've keep getting cramps, or I keep getting headaches, or I can't sleep, or I haven't pooed for 5 days. That one always does concern me when people, I'm like, don't you go every day? But in saying that, that's just one side that's one side, and people are so into people pleasing and overthinking and living life for other people. They're so disconnected from who they are, who they want to be, and don't give themselves permission. We don't process any emotions. We don't have time to ourselves because we're go, 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 go. And at the same time, our bodies are like, hey, trying to give you a heads up. I need a bit of help with this. We block all that. Now people listen to this, oh, I'm on a podcast listening to breath work. Where am I supposed to fit that in?
Yeah. I completely agree. I think we are go, go, go. And where, I guess for me, where can you fit breathwork in? I think it can be as simple as just connecting to seeing where you are breathing, and having the awareness can be such a simple step to then creating change. It doesn't have to be going in for a big session straight off the bat and really diving deep into that. It can be as simple, okay, I've woken up this morning, where is my breath sitting? and just staying curious as to that. And, a lot of people eye roll because it's like, it's breathing. I'm doing it right now. How can it be so powerful? How can it be so impactful? How can it be a trauma therapy? And, I probably had the same thoughts. But I had no idea about the body keeping the score or nervous system regulation or trauma release therapy through the body or any of that. It's kind of like I had the experience first and then started the teachings afterwards. And it became a lived truth for me. Like I hadn't done any of, I guess, the clinical work or, the study around that until it became an experience. And then I think, there is a lot out there. And I feel like social media, Google, all of it, there's a lot of information and we feel quite overwhelmed already with what's on our plate in our day-to-day life. How could I possibly fit a breathwork session in? Or now this is just another thing to add to my to-do list or my morning routine. But a way I see it is like, if you think about it, the first thing you did when you entered this world was take a breath. And the last thing you do when you leave this world will be take a breath. So perhaps the first thing in the morning could be before food, before water is like, cool, let's just check in and see where I'm breathing, because it is such a regulator of our whole entire system. Will set us up for the day. And it doesn't have to be 20 minutes long. It can be simple as one deep belly breath that just goes, oh, okay, that was a little signal that my body needed to say, hey, it's safe. Or one deep belly breath that will help you digest your food better. Or one deep belly breath that creates spaciousness within those inner critical thoughts or those demons within your mind that may then give you enough time to actually become aware. It doesn't have to be so intense or rigorous. I think the beauty of the breath is it can be simple, as well as we can go deeper and create more complexity as well.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because I just wanted to bring that up as people listening to this, and because this is your story and what you've gone through, and one of your superpowers, and what I love about you is that you're like, this doesn't feel right, or the DV situation, this doesn't feel like I'm going, or when you went to Europe, came home. Then I think you went to Byron Bay and then did some yoga training and integrative nutrition stuff. And then you were like, yeah. And then I think it was when you went to Gold Coast, and it got to a point where, and I think a lot of people can resonate with this. This is good, but it's just, there's got to be more. Like that was your thing of, most people would have stopped one of those stops along the way and gone, this will do. Like, you're not curious. Life is tough, whatever our story tells us. And people like to sit in it too. So I want to give you, like, I'm so honored to have you on this podcast, but also you're showing people that it's okay to not settle, because a lot of people will sit in when your dad passed, stayed in that forever, because that's huge and so traumatic, or just stayed in Thailand forever because your pride didn't want to come back and, oh, this will do, or any of these stops. I kind of see them as stops in your timeline. Any of these new modalities you've picked up, like the yoga or the integrated nutrition, and then when you got to Goldie, you were like, you could have been like, this will do. Like, oh, well, like I've kind of got enough information now, this will do. But no, you kept going. You're like, I think there needs to be more. And then coming back to Wollongong, it's like, oh, here's my place. Like it's a full circle. But within that, any time you could have hopped off the bus, and a lot of people do this, and I relate to you too, because I'm very curious too. I'm like, I don't, only now in my mid-40s, I'm like, yeah, I'm never going to have a normal life. I was trying to, when I got married in the white picket fence, and I was trying to live the life that we're all kind of programmed to have. And for some reason, Barbara would never fit in the box. Even at primary school, high school, I was always different in a good way. But when you want to kind of fit in, and so no one notices you, that can be a little bit tricky. And then when you're trying to tick all the boxes, get married, do all the things everyone else does, because that's kind of what happiness is, right? That's what we kind of think. I was like, I'm not happy. And now I just live a life that no one I know kind of does in my circles, which is good. But we're giving permission to other people, other men, other women, that life can look so different. And also that curious part of, I want to learn more. I'm sure there's more. I tell you what, on my darkest times, that's the only thing that's kept me going. What happens if I just hang around for another day and I turn the corner and there's something there? I don't know what's ahead. I've just got to keep going. That's kind of what kept me going through those dark times.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is that open-mindedness and that curiosity of just not, settling, or I think it is just a constant evolution of finding what then becomes aligned with you and where you're at in your life. And it's a constant, I guess, shedding as well. Like there'll be meeting one version of you, and then all of a sudden you confronted with something, and you something else then comes up, and you meet that, and you're like, oh, well, that identity played a part for so long, but now it's time to let that go. As you constantly sift and sort and presented with things, it's like you are trying on different outfits all the time, kind of like finding who you are throughout it all. And it's a constant a journey. It really is. There's no destination, there's no set point, but there is a trusting of your own intuition. And I think sometimes that's kind of been my thing, is like and I still get lost at times, and having people to help me guide me back to my intuition. That's why we have therapists, and we do the inner work, because it's like those people help guide us back to who we are, because it is so easy to get lost in comparison, or looking over the fence, or how we should, or what we should, or we've got to fit in, we've got to fix. And I think the whole time, it's I think sometimes it's deemed as selfish, but it's actually, coming back to, it's actually okay to choose you in this lifetime. And if that, Muay Thai didn't fit me anymore, it was okay to shed that identity. Gold Coast no longer felt like a full body yes. It's okay to walk away from that and start again. And continuously following your own little inner nudges and, your own intuition to you kind of, gosh, I'm back in Wollongong, back where life has done a full circle, which I never imagined, because when we talk about, I never felt at home here. And then it's funny coming back this time, because I'm kind of like, was it ever really this place, or was it actually just me and my own perception of it and how I felt and my own mental health? And now that I've come back and I'm, following so many different, I guess, my own heart, and creating things how I desire to be this time around, and doing the work has shifted me as a human. So being in Wollongong feels completely different to that young girl who left on her first ever trip overseas with a one-way ticket kind of thing. And it's like I had so much resistance from coming back, but it loops back around to how important turning your attention within is, because that's when I truly do believe we start to create life on our own terms that is unique to us, because we become aware of what is true for us, what beliefs do we want to actually believe, how do we want to create our life. And you come home to yourself, you come home to your soul. And I think then that means no matter where you are in life, when you're connected to your own self, home truly does start within.
Yeah. And I think too, how important the support around you, how important meeting that one person can change your whole life.
Yeah.
One conversation, one person can change everything.
Yeah. And if it's not that one person, I think this is a huge thing for people as well, especially entering into the therapy space. So you may, for me, meet one person and maybe you don't resonate, but don't stop there. I think because, that may just lead you to the next therapist who you, again, like it took me a few until I met who I'm working with today, but it was like that, again, that constant, no, there has to be more. And I want to find the person who's going to help me, move through the heaviness and the darkness so I can find the happiness inside of that. So it's like, don't just stop because you've had one experience where you perhaps don't resonate or that therapy isn't for you. There is a way that's going to be unique to you. There is a person out there who's going to be able to support you and guide you. Perhaps just keep going until that does land for you.
Where is your, one last question I've got for you is, if I was to ask you, where is your inner critic and the inner demons today? Like, where are they hanging out?
Oh, I won't lie, and I'll say they're definitely still there in moments of time, especially when I am about to embark on something new or step out of my comfort zone, for sure. I'm definitely still human and I have my moments. I think it's now just having that level of self-awareness, they're definitely nowhere near as where they used to be. They're not overly consuming. If we rated a scale of 1 to 10, where I was when I was a lot younger, I'd probably be on a, I don't know, 50, like completely off the scale. And to now, sometimes they ebb around a 2, maybe on days they peak up when I haven't been taking care of myself. They can come and sneak all the way back up. But I think it's in those moments knowing, okay, cool, do I have the tools to help myself right now and regulate and support? What do I need? And really having that check in, and then going, okay, maybe I've tried those things, but it's not quite working. I'm going to reach out and I need that extra support. I'm going to book an appointment, and that may ebb and flow. So I definitely think, they do ease the more you do the inner work, but at the same capacity, you are life will confront us with things all of the time. Do they completely ever disappear? No, because I do believe they have a point. Maybe instead of an inner critic, they're just our protection mechanism and doing their job to try and keep us safe, and flipping the switch on that and then going, okay, cool. They're trying to keep me safe. They're not necessarily true, but how can I rewrite them into something more? And yet honoring that we're human and life is going to throw challenges at us.
Yeah, but look how far you've come. You said from 50.
Yeah.
From a scale of 1 to 10, 50, I can resonate with that too.
Yeah.
And then down to 2, and sometimes it goes up a bit. But look at that. Like, that's just a huge, it's just, I always say it's just further back in my mind. It's not like I kind of see my mind as kind of these kind of divisions at forefront or the back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, they're there, but they're way back there. And I just kind of tell them to shut up because, again, I know that it's not true.
Yeah.
It's just some words I've picked up from a teacher, or something I've picked up from a partner, or something I've picked up from reading an article, or something that I relate to my story. And the story is just a story. It's actually not real. If it served me, I can carry that, but it doesn't serve me. So I always say they just hang way back and they step forward, and I just tell them to go back. So I think for anyone that's local, Wollongong, Illawarra area, with the breath work, like how can people find you and get hold of you if they want to come in for a session?
Yeah, for sure. So currently have my own little space out of Ghetto Movement Fairy Meadow. Upstairs there, so that's where I do all my one-to-one private sessions. And just on social media is an easy option as well. And yeah, that is pretty much where I float around, really. I'm quite an in-person person. I'm loving that human connection. Otherwise, you can, find me on the Instagram.
Yeah, and I've seen you doing some breath work at that new, it's like a sauna ice plunge thing in Dapto. Are you in there?
Yeah, so me and a beautiful friend have been running some events as well out of there kind of monthly. We haven't had any plan just of yet, but we do have with Oxygen Breathwork an immersion coming up on the 8th of March. It's a 3-hour immersive journey with sound healing and breathwork. So it's actually, you really get to kind of dive deep into understanding the breath and how powerful and transformative it can be. So yeah, definitely floating around Wollongong, doing a few different things here and there as well.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your story and for being so vulnerable and honest, and actually talking in a way where if people haven't delved into this to understand, sometimes when people have got to a certain place of the inner knowing, they talk in ways, and it's not no one's fault, but sometimes people are like, what language are you talking? I don't. So you kept it real, and I think it really gives people hope that if they're going through a tough time right now, there's always something better just around the corner. Like, the tough times don't last. Like they do go, and they're here because they remind us of the good times. But I tell you what, when you're in that dark place, you feel like you're never going to get out. You feel like this is never going to end, and you feel like you look around, you think, oh my God, everyone's got their shit together and everyone's happy. And why is this just happening to me?
Yeah. It's definitely, it feels like when you're in the thick of it, it's like you've got a blindfold on. You can't, it's almost like you cannot see the light in the situation. And as much as it's uncomfortable, I feel like every single time I've been in those places, even though I'm in the thick of it, I know there's going to be light that comes from it.
Mm. So even like your younger self when you're in Europe or you were in Thailand, any of those tough times, you just had that kind of feeling in your stomach? Like, is that what you'd feel it like, or in your heart that, okay, I just got to keep going. I've got to keep moving forward. There's going to be more.
There's definitely a feeling. I mean, I definitely think back then it was a bit more of the, I can't do this anymore. I definitely hit at times, borderline, I want out, I'm done, I can't do this anymore. I got really low, I'm definitely at points. And I didn't see the light out, but there was the tiniest little flicker somewhere in there that kept me going. And it definitely got real low at many a times there where it was just like, I just don't think I can keep going anymore. But again, the littlest thing, if we can just have that little flicker, even if it is an ember, sometimes it can slowly, if we kind of flame it a little bit, it'll start to grow. And over times, you do start to see little glimmers of, okay, there is light here. I can get through this. And like, it is easier to sit back in hindsight now and say, yeah, all of that shaped me into who I am, and I wouldn't go back and change anything. But when you're in the thick of it, that's a real hard thing to be able to say. Yeah.
Does it almost feel like a dream, like such a long time ago now?
Sometimes, sometimes I'm like, what, did that really happen? Like, I almost forget that it was my reality at times. Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that too. It doesn't almost feel like someone else's life, or it happened ages ago. When you actually sit back and think of all the things, you go, whoa, that's a lot.
Yeah. You're like, am I really only 31? Like, I feel sometimes I'm so much more older because I'm like, did that, like, yes, it does. It feels, sometimes you're just like, what? That all happened. And then I think it's a real thing of where beautiful reflection takes place, because it does show you just how far you've come. And I think sometimes we can in this journey feel like we've gone backwards, especially from, even myself working in the therapy space, when you do have moments where, you're confronted with your own stuff and you feel like you're in that dark place again. It's kind of like, oh, am I back there? But you never go back. It's just another kind of circle back around. And I think reflecting sometimes is really powerful, because you're like, whoa,
Yep. I even said that to my therapist at the time. I said to her, she's like, you're doing so well, Barbara. And I was like, no, I feel like, what did I say? I feel like I've taken 10 steps back. And she said, oh, did I not, I forgot to tell you, you will do that. But guess what? You'll leap 200 steps forward or something like that. So I was like, oh, I am going backwards, yes, but it's almost the catapult to make you move forward. And it's backwards, but not as backwards as what, I'm not choosing the words right, but it's back, but not as back as what you think it is. But I relate to that because I remember her. And then I remember saying, like jokingly, but I wasn't joking because I was so over it at that time. I'd done so much therapy. I was like, oh, so when do I get my gold star? Like when does this get good? I mean, all this work I'm doing, when do I get the gold star? When does it get good? And she started laughing. I said, what? And she said, it never ends. I went, oh, you're shitting me.
Yeah.
What? And she's like, no, you do this for life. I was like, oh. And this was way before I was going to be a therapist. And I was like, oh, that's ripped off. What?
All right. Yeah, that whole destination.
Like, I've just opened this can of worms, and you're telling me that I have to keep doing this for the rest of my life. Oh, I should have skipped everything in. Like, bloody hell.
Yeah, which I think can deter some people, right? Because they're like, oh, once it's open, that's it, it's open. But I kid you not, it may be open, but the level of freedom that does come with it is just.
Like you, I wouldn't do things any other way. Apart from I would have made better choices. But I wouldn't have done it any other way. But honestly, thank you, because what you do and your story is going to help so many people.
Thank you. That is all I could ever, I guess, have the intention for, is that, I do believe that uh, our story is medicine. And when we share it, we give other permission to not only accept and embrace their own story, but, open up and seek change or choose themselves, or go, oh, whoa, okay, there is another way. And perhaps I can take a piece of that and maybe, try it on for myself and experience it for myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there'll be something in you that someone's listening that they can resonate. We all see a bit of ourselves in someone. So listening to you, there'll be someone there listening going, oh yeah, I want to look her up and I want to see where she's at and I want to connect with her, because that's how we heal. So I think that, yeah, everything that you've shared, there'll be someone that will really be relating to that and can hear themselves in you, like what you're talking. So thank you for being brave and vulnerable to share on a podcast, because I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I actually forget that I'm doing a podcast, and I actually forget the things that I say other people listen to. And if I sit here long enough, I go, oh, that's so cringe. But in the moment when I'm in the flow, I can't remember over the nearly 140 episodes. I've got no idea what I've said.
Yeah.
It's very vulnerable and very. There's no way the younger version of me would have done that. There's no way. But this is the thing. You get stronger and you try things, and it is so cathartic and just so free. Maybe instead of being a girl or a woman that has to tick all the boxes and look a certain way and do all the things, imagine if someone had said to me a very long time ago, Barbara, how about just be yourself?
Mm, mm,
Whitney, just be you. You're
yeah.
perfect exactly. Just be you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks for that. I would have saved a lot of money and a lot of heartache.
Yep.
But no, thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I've been, I feel so honored, and it's been such a beautiful chat. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hang out sometime. We're only down the road from each other. So yeah, I'm sure we'll do a collab or something together soon.
Sounds amazing. Sign me up for it.
Yes. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope this conversation has added value to your self-care journey and inspired positive changes in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it with a friend who might benefit from this episode. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or on your favourite podcast platform to stay up to date on future episodes. Your support means the world to me. I genuinely love hearing from you, so please take a moment to leave a review. Let me know which part of today's episode resonated with you the most. Your feedback guides the direction of this podcast, and I really appreciate each and every single one of you for being a part of this community. To fall in love with yourself is the first secret to happiness. To find out a bit more about the Studio Chat podcast, head over to my Instagram page, Studio Chat Podcast, or if you want to find out a bit more about my counselling private practice, head over to Instagram on self_care_studio. I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep embracing the journey of self-discovery.